Welcome to Sharpening Supplies, and today we're going to be talking about sharpening steels. A few weeks ago I posted a pet peeve of mine on our Facebook page, and that was nearly every piece of information on sharpening steels says that they don't actually sharpen the knife, they just realign the edge, and that is false. So I honestly think that pretty much any sharpening steel that you get will sharpen your knife. It's not just about pushing a misaligned edge back into alignment, and that started quite a lot of conversation on our Facebook group. But I'd like to open it up to you guys and hear what you think about that. So, yeah, John, what are your thoughts?
I think the biggest issue really comes to defining what a steel is. I do think that, when I think of a steel, I think of the traditional thing that I received with my knife block. This is actually the steel I received as a gift on my wedding day, along with this knife. And so, before I got into sharpening, this is what I used. For a while, it seemed effective, and then stopped being so. But really, we have other items on the table here that are considered steels. Some are highly abrasive. This one by Norton, you can clearly feel the abrasiveness in it. And then we have a ceramic steel here, and then we have a couple of more traditional steels here and here. And so, they are certainly all look like steels, but they really are different things. So I think, to me, that is at the heart of the discussion.
I'm kind of putting them all into all of those as no matter what you call it, it's a honing rod, it's a sharpening steel, and I think all of them, no matter what, sharpen still.
To me, they're all doing the same thing. What varies here is much like a stone where you've got really coarse to really, really fine. The different levels, whether what's called a honing rod is typically at the very fine end. Diamond steels tend to be at the very coarse to the kind of middle end. Traditional steels can be anywhere depending on how heavily they are grooved. And with the grooves, like you said, yours stopped being effective. Well, part of that might be that the grooves get worn down, so it gets smoother and smoother and smoother. Much like if you took a stone and you made it finer and finer and finer with every use. So all of these can be effective. It's a matter of what do you need your steel to do, and pick one that's going to be kind of in the appropriate grit range for what you're asking the steel to do.
What would you say is an appropriate thing to ask a steel to do? Because in my mind, if I've got a properly blunt kitchen knife, I'm taking it to the stones, and then I'm using one of these to maintain it. But could I fully sharpen a blunt knife on a steel?
Most steels are just way too fine for you to put a new edge back on. So steels to me are much more about possibly finishing after your stones if you have a really, really fine one, but more about maintaining. You hit your steel before you think you're losing cutting ability, and you won't have to go back to your stones as often.
And so when you say steel, that would apply to any of these, or just the finer ones?
For me, any of them. A lot of meat cutters I talk to, for instance, like a toothier edge. Not all, but some. So they're going to use a coarser steel. Well, it's still doing the same thing. It's maintaining the edge at the level they want to maintain it.
Right.
If you're doing really fine cuts of tomato, you're going to be, maybe one of the ceramics or maybe a smooth rod. But it's all maintenance. It's just where do you need your knife maintained? And a steel will keep it at that level.
Do you have one of these at home?
Yeah, I've got, much like John, I've got an even simpler kind of traditional steel, and I've also got a ceramic honing rod. I use both of them. The traditional steel is a little bit coarser, the honing rod is a little finer. So kind of depending where my knife is at, I'll hit them with one or the other.
So one of the common topics is that you wouldn't use a traditional steel on a really hard knife, let's say a Japanese knife.
Mm-hmm.
What's your feeling on that?
Honestly, I'm not enough of a metallurgist to know if you're potentially risking damage. I've heard about micro cracking and really hard. I don't know. From the experience we have, it works. But if you're concerned about it, if you've got a really special knife and you're just really concerned about it, I'd stick to the ceramic at that level, just as a...
Would you use a ceramic, or would you just go back to a stone or a strop or something?
A strop would also be good. I think whether you would decide between a strop and or steel and stones kind of depends on your setup. It might be inconvenient for you to go back to your stones. You might need something kind of where you're working. And in that case, a fine ceramic or a strop would do an excellent job.
Right, because that's like the really great thing about these is the convenience. Like, I'm betting quite a few of you at home have something like this living in a kitchen drawer. And so this can stay there, there's no real setup, no real mess. Like you can, like you said, even before the tool starts to get blunt, you can bring your kitchen knife to it without creating any mess or setup.
Exactly.
So yeah, really convenient.
Right where you need it, when you need it.
Yeah, excellent.
The reason I brought, my steel and my knife from home that I've had for almost 20 years now is that, with a knife like this, let's say like a butcher, you mentioned butchers earlier, they're sharpening on a coarser stone, typically. Like the classic I think of is like the Norton IM313.
Exactly.
And the finest grit is 400. So that's not really what most people are doing these days. But if you were to take a knife and sharpen it to 400, you will feel
Kind of toothiness to the edge.
You will feel a burr, a toothiness.
Yeah.
And I feel that something like this is very effective at maintaining an edge that's really coarse like that.
Yeah.
So if I had a Japanese knife, I probably wouldn't use this at all.
Okay.
It's something that I'm sharpening much finer. So for me, why these seem so traditional is that they're often used in conjunction with very traditional, let's say, at least in American culture, traditional sharpening stones, which are generally more coarse. So I feel like that makes a difference.
Do you make any distinction between a sharpening steel and a honing rod, either of you?
I do. To me, a sharpening steel is like something like this, Yes, we do call these steels the diamond ones in ceramic, but I would personally differentiate because to me this is more of a circular version of a stone, and because of we sell them. Do we call them steels? Yes, I mean that is literally what's on the packaging, and so so it does create some confusion. I mean, can we alone solve that confusion? No. Can we, are we adding to the confusion? Maybe.
Us? I'd agree with that. The way I personally tend to do it is a distinction between sharpening kind of being at the coarser end of the spectrum, honing being kind of at the finer end of the spectrum. So if I say honing rod, I'm probably talking about something really fine. If I say steel, I'm probably talking about something coarse to medium. But you do need to, when you're asking, you do need to be clear. If you want one specific, you need to say, a steel or a ceramic steel.
Right.
So, steel or honing rod?
I would call it a steel because it's made out of steel, but it is fairly fine. So I suppose you could call it a honing rod if you wanted.
To me, that's a steel.
Yeah.
Steel.
Dan?
Yeah, I'd agree, steel.
Quick fire round.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah,
because it's coarse, but it's not steel.
No, I mean that to me, I mean that's a. I wouldn't call that a steel necessarily. I would call that a relatively coarse sharpening rod.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd call that a honing rod.
Yeah.
Ceramic. I think it's more at the honing end.
Played this game before. That's a knife.
Yeah, edge knife. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That one's seen a lot of steels, a lot of different sharpeners. This one's been our test mule for 15 years now.
We reworked that one a couple times.
Yep.
And we've agreed that this one's a steel, and then this one
Steel.
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 Dan.
You could call it a steel. I tend to call it a diamond rod.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think diamond rod is what I would call it if I was.
and then the DMT.
Same diamond rod. I suppose I'd probably slip into calling it a diamond steel, which maybe that's oxymoronic. I don't know. But
Yeah.
if you throw the word diamond in there,
I mean,
anything that's got diamond specifically.
The challenge we have is that we need to explain them as our customers would understand them.
Yeah.
And so if these are commonly called a steel, we want to use as appropriate a language as we can. So.
And for instance, on the website, if we had a different category for each one of these, it'd be extremely confusing. I mean,
Right.
Everything here can be found on our Sharpening Steels page.
Right.
Could we quibble about whether or not they're actually steels? Yes, absolutely.
Which is
But
what we're doing right now.
right, exactly. Keeps us amused.
Yeah.
But for categorization, we can lump them all in under steels and then divide them from there.
Right. Yeah, and I think like that was part of my pet peeve was that like these are all generally referred to as one topic, either honing rod or sharpening steel or something. And some people say that they just realign, but I think they all cut, they all sharpen,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're in agreement with that I'm justified in being annoyed at steel, people saying steels just realign an edge when actually they do sharpen. But they put a micro bevel on your edge. They don't remove a lot of steel, but they do remove steel.
Every one I've ever used, you can see the swarf.
Yeah.
So to me, that says they're removing.
Yeah.
So I'd say annoyance justified.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, let's say if I'm using this together, is it removing some steel? Yes, very small amounts. Is it, but the amount of aligning that it's doing is greater than the amount of steel it's removing. I mean, when this knife, I can feel a burr, I can feel a little burr, and I can feel it on this side. If I do that, I don't feel it on that side. Did I remove so much metal that I just completely removed all that metal from that burr? Not possible.
Right.
So I do think there is an aligning aspect of it, but certainly to say that it removes no metal would be inaccurate.
Right.
I think at a certain point too, you can just say, maybe we don't fully understand exactly what's happening there, microscopic.
Who is in charge of hanging the sign?
I think we'll leave it down because we'll put it in a warm position. So I would like to know in the comments, would you refer to these as sharpening steels? Would you refer to these as honing rods? Or, would you make a distinction between every different one? Let us know what your thoughts are there. If you're interested in buying a steel, then like Dan said, we've got a page that features all of these and more at sharpeningsupplies.com.